In the Eastern realm, populated with Gnomons, the petty kingdom of Axles is without ruler. Prematurely did their king pass, and the void left swung open the gates of war when the surrounding kingdoms, petty in name also, hastily moved to enforce their claims. The Council of Axles, bound by honor and duty, denied all usurpers, and instead voted, a Gnomia named Gnomia was to be their regent. She was, however, thinking beyond her position. Her words alone were enough, and quickly, with her new powers, she controlled the kingdom's gates, removed from the people's eyes those that disagreed, and raised an army, mightier in strength than those that opposed. To the north, from the northern deserts come the people of Munra. These people survived on imports from those south to them, as well as from their north. Their economy could not withstand the petty kingdom of Axles falling into the hands of their enemies, the petty kingdom of Dori. Thus, they were forced to declare for the land south of their kingdom. Immediately, they launched an invasion into both southern kingdoms, Axles and Dori, opting to take out Dori first, for Axles was without a strong leader, and they had nigh a noteworthy army, leaving it to be left to its own devices for the time being. The petty kingdom of Dori is a place that harbors many fields of flowers. It boasts wonderful magical prowess, and generally held great reputation with those around them. This was, ultimately, not enough to stop the corrupting of their ministers. They, in a so-called defensive stand, falsely raised their banners in aid of Axles. Obvious to outsiders alike, all could see that it was a blatant attempt at expansion by a peoples of whom seemingly had everything. Yet, as they had grown complacent in their privileges, Dori was not war-ready, and their magic prodigies were too busy studying or being kidnapped by the darkness to the west. With Monra and Dori now determined to war with one another, they mobilized their armies, both totaling about 50,000 strong. Monra's general, named Madri, sends troops to their northeastern border in a strategic move. With this, Monra will stop any attempted flanking by the enemy around Axles' northern mountains. Monra understands that Axles is out of their reach, for now, and sends the bulk of their military might through the southern part of the desert gully, marching through the heat and reaching the borders of Dori. Here, Dori arrives a few days before the approaching armies, and sets up a defensive perimeter in between their mountains. Dori, impatient, and wanting to control Axles as soon as possible, send an invading force, disguised as a defensive garrison, of 20,000 to be stationed in the borders of Axles, with their 30,000 remaining soldiers remaining in the north. The Dorian general Bombus had high hopes for an effective defensive battle, and so was not at all worried about the lack in manpower upon facing the northern invaders. After all, he had magic users and the advantage of the Glens Mountains. He was confident. However, his confidence was misplaced. His magic users, of which there were only a few, had no battle experience, and were but apprentices. Nevertheless, he remained resolved and confident in his decision-making abilities, even if his captains are of an opposing mindset. The first battle of the War of the Three Kingdoms of Western Gnomon lands begin when the already parched Munrarian troops are sent forth to attack the mildly fortified Dorians. Outnumbered, the Dorians must rely on defensive positioning if they are to stand a chance. The Munrarians are a hardy people, often able to go over 2 days in the blistering desert waterless and without sleep. They are naturally made to be this way. Being born in a small oasis that is surrounded by sand and rock, they have nothing to do but to fight each other. And when the Munrarians are not fighting amongst themselves, they pilgrimage to the mountains to forage for anything worth selling to the merchants. A difficult people to beat down indeed. And whereas the Munrarians are hard-working and somewhat poor peoples, the opposite could absolutely be said for the Dorians. They welcome the cooler winds from the south, that brings with it the rain. This straight-shooting wind also brings the scent of trade, as they are placed, some might say luckily so, in a glen of fields and farmable lands. Their land is perfect for almost any type of living, and they have long been resented by those to the north. In the beginning days of the war, despite arriving before the Manrarians, Dorian troops lagged behind in setting up their camps, leading for the Manrarians to gain a foothold in the area. In no time at all, the desert warriors were at the doorstep of the Dorian army camp, threatening immediate victory. The first confrontation arrived as expected, with the Northerner army provoking an attack into the mountains. The terrain surrounding the Dorian camp made it so it would either be through total victory that the Manrarians would win, or through tactical army movement. The desert-dwelling Manrarians were able to push back the Dorian front line all the way back to their own province. This came at a cost. Many men were lost from the Manrarians' army. The Manrarians were often headstrong and lacked discipline. Despite outnumbering the Dorians, they foolishly weakened themselves as a result of this push forward, overextending even more. The logistical line of the invading Monra army struggled to supply the front lines. This, along with the determination of the defending troops from Dori, made it possible, if timed correctly, for a breakthrough to occur. The southern men of Dori were able to hold their ground, losing few casualties. And it wouldn't be long before the already strained and overextended Northerner army found themselves being pushed back. This, due to a brilliantly timed charge suggested by an apprentice magician. Low-born by birth, this young gnomon named Ganymede would go on to become perhaps the most famous individual in not just the Gnomon East, but the world entire. More on that another day. The push outward was only short-lived, however, for the Dorians were forced back into their camp once again. The invaders proving to be more adept than what their actions suggest. This, of course, was due to their innate ability to work tirelessly, as previously mentioned. All was not lost, however, for spotted across the lake by the Dorian scouts was a small contingency of soldiers from the enemy's backline. Brash and poorly made, the decision to flank the camp by crossing the lake and not to be present to reinforce the front line when needed is what the Dorians needed to break through once more. And break through they did, changing the battle's cape entirely. The camps of the Manrarians were all but destroyed, leaving no logistical necessities to reach the troops on the front line. Now forced to scavenge, many started to lose hope from the Manrarian army, and morale dropped. Starving and alone, the decision was almost made multiple times to retreat west, then to create a camp and go from there. Every time, however, the decision was vetoed by the commanders, until finally they were forced to lead west. This decision was made too late, as the morale had already dropped by the time the decision was made. Although many efforts, great in idea and practice, were made by the invaders to repel enemy advancement upon their newly and quickly made camps, there seemed to be no way out, with each camp getting stomped out and the Manrarians forced to flee. The decision was made by the highest-ranked soldier, Captain Conahoy, to remain and defend. This was a difficult thing to do, for there was no defensive terrain nearby, apart from a small collection of fruit trees planted on a farm to the south. "Dig in and wait," said Captain Conahoy, and so wait, they did. With victory seeming inevitable, the Dorian general ordered a full-scale assault on the cornered Manrarians, leaving his flank open from almost all directions due to recalling all units. This was a fatal flaw, however, for from the farthest reaches of the desert came a surprise, one that would shake up the battle's cape once again. If you enjoyed, please re-watch with popcorn, maybe even some chocolate strawberries too. Presented by Karzi and Beeji Games. The game shown within this video is Karzi's Castles, an originally made and published game by Karzi and Beeji Games. Visit karziandbeejigames.com for information surrounding Karzi's Castles.